A frequent question we field throughout the roofing industry is, can I use attic exhaust vents, such as box vents, low on the roof as intake vents? We're going to answer that question right now. Hi there. Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Airing It Out with AirVent. My name is pscelsi. I host AirVent's Attic Ventilation Ask the Expert seminars offered every winter to residential roofing professionals all across North America since 1998. It is okay to use attic exhaust vents such as box vents. They're also called can vents, pot vents, turtle vents, roof louvers, low on the roof, acting as intake vents as long as the vent manufacturer tested the vent for that application. That's the key. Has the vent been tested for use low on the roof? To help us explore this further, let me introduce my co-worker, Colby Cruz, product design engineer at AirVent for the ventilation business at Gibraltar Building Products. Welcome to the podcast, Colby.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for having me, Paul. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Just like Paul said, I'm Colby Cruz, product design engineer here at AirVent, and I'm really excited to dive in on this topic and share what some of our testing has shown.
Thank you very much, Colby. Excited to have you as well. Colby, we receive this question that I just repeated pretty regularly. In fact, I personally hear it during the Q&A sessions of our seminars in many cities annually. Before we dig into the particulars, Colby, of when it's okay to use a box vent low on the roof, I thought I'd briefly explain for our listeners why someone would even be interested in using an attic exhaust box vent as an intake vent. Some municipalities across North America have code requirements calling for the attic intake vents to be more than 10 feet from the lot line. Well, zero lot line homes are being built with the edge of the home 5 feet from the lot line. In those cases, traditional intake vents, such as rectangular under-eave vents, soffit vents, vented drip edge, or rooftop intake vent, the edge vent, they will not meet the requirement of being more than 10 feet from the lot line. But a box vent positioned low on the roof, but not at the very edge of the roof, would satisfy the 10-foot requirement. That's why someone would want to use an attic exhaust box vent as an intake vent. Colby, the concern with using exhaust box vents in general low on the roof has been water entry. All along, water entry has been top of mind. In a rain event, the volume of water and the velocity of the water traveling on the roof before hitting the vent is very different when the vent is high on the roof, exhaust, versus low on the roof, intake. There's also the wind speed and the direction of the wind to contend with. Installed as exhaust a few feet from the roof peak, every style of box vent on the market, round, square, slant back, safely handles the volume and velocity of rainwater. That's not the case when those vents are installed low on the roof. Colby, vent shape and design come into play more significantly as the volume and velocity of rainwater increases.
Yeah, Paul, that's exactly right, and that's perfectly said right there. Just like you mentioned, the biggest concern is always going to be the accumulation of runoff water from the ridge, right? When an exhaust vent is installed close to the ridge, there's just not enough time and not enough roof, frankly, above it for the water to accumulate and start to pool up and cause a significant concern for water intake and weather infiltration. But once you allow the space between the ridge and the top of the vent, i.e., when you're installing it as an intake vent lower on the roof, water can pool up and start to gain momentum and volume, like you said. And so, of course, this is why, like you alluded to here, we'll talk about in just a moment, vent geometry becomes far more critical in an intake service than in an exhaust service for these vents.
Thank you, Colby, for that additional explanation. And I like that emphasis on the amount of roof surface in front of the vent. High on the roof versus low on the roof. Colby AirVent put our exhaust box vents to the test to see how they would do with handling rainwater low on the roof. 5 of them did very well and are thus okay to use low on the roof as intake vents. I'll list them right now. Model SLP 61, model RVG 55, model SLA, model RVGL 50, and model RVAL 50. Colby, they all have one thing in common: a slant back design.
Yep, just exactly right again. The slant back profile, we'll get right into it. Slant back profile actually creates a nice natural deflection surface for that water, right? So you can imagine a high volume of water flowing down the roof surface, and as soon as it hits that slant back part of the dome of the vent, well, it's almost like a reverse drip pitch, if you will. The water hits that angled surface and it's directed away from the inlet rather than straight into it, like you would get with a typical or with other types of non-slant back vents. And so, of course, you are relieved of a lot of that water volume potentially hitting the opening in the roof deck. Another nice feature of most of these slant backs is that they are either fully enclosed or almost fully enclosed, meaning that the dome just about covers all of the possible entry points from the flange, the base flange. And so, of course, that also helps deflect some water, not only in these water runoff situations, but also with omnidirectional wind-driven rain, right? So if the wind's coming from the side of the vent or from the back of the vent, even from the eave itself, right? You're going to get some geometry there that deflects the water off and once again protects that opening in the roof. And finally, another advantage of these, this is maybe you can consider this the last line of defense, if you will. The bases of these vents all have a collar that's about 2 to 3 inches it's tall. So in the case that any water does get past the dome, slant back dome, or it gets under sort of the underneath the parts that are not fully enclosed through the baffles or just through a gap somewhere, the high collars actually are like a last line of defense for any water that may run off into those parts of the vents, and they once again protect the opening from water filtration. So it's really the combination of all these design features of these vents that make them lend themselves very nicely to this intake situation.
Thank you, Colby, for that explanation. Would you please, Colby, explain how we tested the vents low on the roof for water entry?
Absolutely. So I'm sure some of our Florida listeners, but maybe not just them, will be familiar with the Miami-Dade TAS 100A testing, or at least are familiar with the idea of what that entails. And so that was, for anyone that's not aware, that's essentially one of the most, if not the most stringent lines of testing for roof ventilation and roof accessory applications. Essentially, it tests your vents in a way that it tosses water at them with wind-driven rain is the word we'll use here, and we use that as a baseline for these vents to be tested at. The standard itself simulates about 8.89 inches per hour, inches of rain per hour, to drive this rain, and it maxes out at 115 or 135. Let me check. I have the standard open here. Sorry, 110 miles per hour.
The wind speed.
Yep,
Yeah,
wind speed of 110 miles per hour. Yep. And so that's exactly what we did. We matched the wind speed of that, but we actually we went ahead and went a little more aggressive with the simulated rainfall rate of we bumped it up from 8.8 to about 11 inches per hour. And so if you look into the standard, the way we did that is we actually we made the surface area of the vent profile and the deck that we use, we made it smaller. And so what that means is that we're actually targeting the same amount of water and the same speed of water, just on a much smaller profile. And so that kind of gave us a bit more confidence that, hey, if we can, we're not a official lab, of course, that you would test this here, but if we're gonna throw more water into a smaller space on the vent and we can still meet the same results that you would get with a Miami-Dade testing like this, then we can feel very confident that our in-house testing is just as aggressive as, or if not more, than what you would get in a lab. And so what we did is we used an electrical fan essentially to propel the water at this high wind speed of 110 miles per hour. We just went straight to the most aggressive part of the standard. And we did this for all the events that you just listed. We did this at 3/12 pitch and we did it at 12/12 pitch. So we figured those are a very good range of not only what we currently recommend these and allow these vents to be installed as exhaust, but also a pretty good range for what you might see in the field, out there. I'm not sure you'll get much flatter without getting into very specialized roofs and 3/12, and the same can be said, I believe, for 12/12. That's very steep roof pitch at that point.
Very steep, yes. Yes.
So yes, we set up our test deck. We mounted each vent a few feet above the eave, above our simulated eave, and we shot the water exactly as you would in Miami-Dade testing. And what we found is that these 5 slightback models were the ones that passed the very, very, very stringent Miami-Dade percentage of 0.05% of allowable water to be infiltrated in the deck. So what that means is, of the many, many gallons that we shot at this thing, the Miami-Dade testing only allows for a very, very tiny fraction of this water to infiltrate the deck. And these were the 5 vents that we found that allowed just that much or less to be into the deck. And so, yeah, that was essentially what we did with our testing, and that's what gave us the most confidence right here to fully advertise these vents as being allowed to be used in the intake situations.
It's impressive, Colby. It's impressive because that's not a lot of water allowed.
No, it's really not. I would have thought the first time I had looked at the standard that there must have been a misprint of some sort. I thought maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 0.5%, but no, it is truly is 0.05. Yes. So yeah, it's very it's a lot of confidence put in.
Yes. And Colby, I know what you're going to say because of how you just explained the testing, but I would like to hear it anyway, if you don't mind, please. Having been part of the test protocol personally, conducting the testing and fully understanding AirVent's concern or long-term concern about potential water entry when using exhaust box vents low in the roof as intake, what's your comfort level recommending these 5 models of AirVent box vents as intake, please?
Oh yes, absolutely, fully confident in this application. Like you mentioned, we just talked about, we intentionally overstressed the testing of these to capture, what we believe to make up for the fact that we're doing this testing internally, right? We want to make sure that we're not only just meeting the benchmark, but trying to exceed it as much as possible to account for any discrepancies that may be there. But also not even just in the testing we did. It might be worth mentioning that this entire project started not only from the questions that you've been receiving at ATE, but before my time, allegedly, we've heard many reports of roofers and customers alike using these vents already. Despite our prior recommendations to
Yes.
only use men's exhaust vents. People do what they're going to do, right? That's
Yeah.
one of the first things you learn, and as a designer, as an engineer making products, is you say one thing about your products, but people are going to use them how they're going to use them. So we figured, after so much time of hearing that and hearing, frankly, the good results that came out of these, specifically with the SLP61 and the SLA RBG55 models, and so much customer anecdotal data of, hey, we've had this on our roof in an intake condition for 10, 15 years and it's never leaked.
Right.
Not just one person, but a whole builders, like many builders, this coming out of. So we figured, hey, if this is really the case in the field, then let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get our ducks in a row, do the testing and see what comes of it. And sure enough, the
Yes.
testing matched the practice that we've seen in the field. So all that to say, I am very confident that this is going to be something that'll be really helpful for a lot of people. And it's about time that we aligned what we say with what's actually happening out there in the field.
Happening. Yes. Thank you, Colby. And you're absolutely right. I have also been hearing, we've been using whatever brand, our brand X, we've been using box vents low. What I like additionally, and this is very reassuring, we've tested it now, and now that guidance is backed by the testing, and I feel good about that. So thank you for sharing that, Colby. For our listeners, please refer to the installation instructions for more information specific to using these vents as intake vents. And keep in mind, Colby already teased it in the testing, but the roof pitch range for these vents, for these 5 vents, is 312 up to 1212 pitch. For more information, you can please visit our website, GibraltarBuildingProducts.com. Colby, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners, either about using exhaust box vents as intake vents, the testing that we did, or really, Colby, anything at all that you'd like to share?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just leave everyone with the last note of, you kind of mentioned it right here. Always check your local building codes is my biggest piece of advice. We say these things as we tested them here, but we can't cover every installation application, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of local codes out there. So when in doubt, check your codes. And if you need any additional guidelines, you can feel free to reach out to us. Paul mentioned Gibraltar Building Products, but feel free to reach out to AirVent ourselves. We're always happy to give guidance when it's needed and when a situation is not perfectly cut and dry. So we have a lot of confidence in this, but the code is always going to should always influence how you approach any project.
Great way to summarize that. Thank you, Colby, so much. And I want to thank you, Colby, for being our guest today and for explaining the behind-the-scenes testing, our thought process, to help us answer a very common question from the roofing industry that probably is going to become even more common. Thank you so much, Colby, for your time.
Absolutely, Paul. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's okay to use attic exhaust vents, such as box vents, low on the roof as intake, as long as the vent manufacturer tested them for that application. Well, that wraps up this episode. Please leave a review on YouTube or whatever platform you used to listen to this episode. Be sure to let us know if there's a topic you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Maybe you'd like to be a guest one day, or maybe you know someone who would make a great guest. Drop us a note on the podcast page of our website, GibraltarBuildingProducts.com. You can also reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. And please come back for more Airing It Out with AirVent. I'm Paul Pscelsi. Thanks for listening.